Hello and welcome to this quick overview over the newly released 0810 release of Wonderland Engine. We're just gonna briefly highlight a couple of interesting improvements, and in general, we fixed a couple of crashes, various bugs. We have great improvements to the import pipeline, amazing improvements to the UX and productivity, and finally, we've restored the support for macOS Catalina. So if you have an older macOS operating system, it will now run Wonderland Engine as well. So let's start by looking at the UX, and we can see immediately that the contrast of the entire application has slightly changed. And we can see if we select elements here, it is now way more clearly visible than before that these objects are selected, or that these elements are selected. The probably biggest improvement that we made is to the add component dialog. If we add components here, we can now see that we moved from a multi-column layout to a dual column layout with the native components on the left and the JavaScript components on the right. With this search field, we can now easily just add new components by inputting their name, enter, and that adds the component already, and then we can add the next, and maybe an input component, and maybe a view component as well. And we can close the dialog by clicking anywhere or by clicking escape. Now we also fixed dragging and dropping components, where before moving a component like this would not have made the component appear properly. Now it does. Copying with control just works like before. The asset browser now is also more intuitive. So if we want to create new folders, we don't have to use the left folder column, but we can now also create folders just in the files column like you would in any other file explorer. We can now also delete folders from here and rename them like we can files. The resources view also got some improvements. We now have the search bar even in the pipelines tab. The pipelines tab especially got quite some improvements, where before it would unfortunately crash quite often. It now does no longer do that, and if we drag and drop the resources tab to the right and select the Phong opaque textured pipeline, which in this example has normal mapping enabled, if we disable normal mapping and enable it again, we see that the materials finally update fully correctly. And if we select the material here, we can even see the material update in real time and remove the normal map property or add it back in. With that fixed, some minor things we changed here are various drop-down boxes now having full width of the columns, or also the simplify input fields being now correct. But we've also made some changes that are useful for productivity. In the project settings, you will now find a new setting in the editor tab which regards the IDs. And the IDs are the numbers that are assigned to every resource. We can see them here in the ID column in every resource table that we can find in a resources view. And we can now change this to use universally unique identifiers, which will help especially in projects that are being worked on by multiple people, and this can help reduce merge conflicts when working with source control. So for skinning and vertex shading, we generally have a couple of optimizations this release, but we also added a cool new feature where now for animations, like for example for this dancing Mixamo default character here, we can now change the speed at which the animation plays back. So we can, for example, play this animation in slow-mo, or play the animation backwards, or even speed up the animation to be way quicker. For lights, we have great improvements because before, switching lights and changing the light type would sometimes cause issues, where now this all works very reliably and very much as you would expect. Adding new lights immediately will trigger the necessary shader compilations, and removing lights will all work exactly as expected. You can now even use projects without lights entirely, which is very interesting for projects that bake shadows and bake lighting completely. And finally, we fixed a bug where the debug visualization of physics components would not be showing up. And it now shows up even without the need of pressing Alt-S or clicking Debug Simulate Physics. It just works out of the box like you would expect it to. I hope you'll enjoy these improvements we made to Wonderland Engine 0810. As always, you can download Wonderland Engine for free on wonderlandengine.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the Wonderland Engine Discord server.